is important because we cannot achieve inclusion from top down. We need to ask parents, learners, and communities feedback on how to make progress. And that also includes non-government organizations and actors who can act as watchdogs, as advocates, but also as providers of services that need to be aligned with the government's policy on inclusion. And we need to collect data on and for inclusion with attention and respect. But ultimately, it is teachers' attitudes that are really so important, that matter so much for inclusion. 1 in 3 teachers in the OECD 2018 tallies reported that they did not adjust their teaching to students' cultural diversity, for instance. Teachers, like the rest of the population, may have entrenched views about students' potential, and they're not, unfortunately, immune to social biases and stereotypes. And that's why the report's core recommendation when it comes to teachers is that we need to empower the education workforce, and to achieve that, inclusion should be a core part of initial and in-service training, and not a specialist topic as it has often been treated. Unfortunately, competencies in inclusion are not required for teacher licensing and certification in many countries, which reduces the incentives of teacher education institutions to add inclusion competencies in their programs. In many parts of the world, the lack of diversity is also a problem, and that also is the case with aging teaching forces in some of the world's richest countries, especially when these teachers do not have access to continuous professional development opportunities. And support personnel, both teaching assistants, but also professionals, either are lacking, or even in those countries where they are more likely to exist, their roles are often not clearly defined, and they end up substituting teachers, violating the principles of inclusion and not supporting teachers as is the ideal. And let's not forget school leaders, who should really be championing an inclusive ethos, and yet they have not been adequately prepared. Overall, 1 in 4 teachers in the Tally survey reported high need for training on teaching students with special needs. As a byproduct of the global report, we had published a policy paper late last year on inclusive teaching that I can direct you. It has 6 recommendations. I briefly mentioned them. It's important to communicate a clear vision for inclusion in laws and policies that support teacher education. Pre-service and in-service training programs need to be reviewed to ensure that the principles that we're talking about are fully mainstreamed. There should be a more effective balance of theory-based learning and hands-on practice, helping teachers be child-centered, and I'll come back to that in a minute. We need to support teachers, as I mentioned, with teaching assistants, but those teaching assistants that really support teachers and not substitute them. We need to meaningfully engage teachers and their organizations. And we should not forget to embed a culture of monitoring and evaluation. Now, I was just referring to child-centeredness, and social and emotional learning is a key part of that. Teachers who work with vulnerable students, who often have suffered trauma, face particular hardships and need training to address the classroom challenges. And of course, there's a very wide range. And that's why I was mentioning earlier that we need to make sure that all teachers are ready to support all students. And teachers should be trained in the type of whole school approach that is required for social and emotional learning interventions to be effective. We should not forget, therefore, teachers also own their own well-being. They need training and support to recognize others, but also to deal with their own stresses. And of course, that has come to the fore with the COVID-19 education crisis, which of course has faced education systems with multiple challenges, from quality of learning, which of course is the distance learning approaches have also only been partial substitutes, to data. We often do not know what is going on around the world, and we struggle to form a coherent picture. And it's important to follow the do no harm principle. Many of the approaches that have been promoted in the rush to help education systems continue their operations often leave some of the most disadvantaged learners behind. And let's not also forget teachers themselves who have been left behind, and the caregivers who have taken the brunt often of helping their children to continue their education in over the past year. That brings me to an end. Just a reminder for all of you that the report has a range of resources, but last but not least, in addition to the global report, there have been 2 regional editions for the first time this year. The first covered Latin America and the Caribbean. And the second covered Central and Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. Each of them is a report in its own with fresh research material. I invite you to take a look for insights in your respective regions. Thank you very much for the invitation and for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you, Manos, for covering such a fantastic array in a very short amount of time. If people have questions, comments, we see people are starting to use the chat box for that purpose, but please, we encourage you to continue to do so. And also to share resources, share what's working for you, which we'll get into even in more depth in the 3 breakout sessions that are to come. Next, I'm really honored to introduce Dr. Diana Willis, who is with the Center for Learning in Practice. She's the director at the Carey Institute for Global Good. She brings with us today over 35 years of experience in the fields of adult and work-based education, including policy development, program design, and research. And she has published on innovations in learning extensively, and previously co-founded and was a managing partner with Knowledge in the Public Interest. We're so delighted that she was able to join us today. And Diana, I think you have full access to share your slides. Please let us know if we can help in any way.
Okay. Hopefully you're seeing this.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much for the invitation to join you all. I'm honored to be here, and I'm going to pick up it a little bit where Manos left off, which is there's a lot of work to be done, and we find ourselves in a landscape now that is very different than the landscape that we've been used to. And COVID really, as we said, has just revealed what we are going to face have faced in the short term and what we will face in the long term. So I'm going to talk to you about sustainability. How will we enact these actions for early childhood inclusive education? Our approach is sustainable learning. So let me just say a little bit about the Center for Learning and Practice. Our mission is to transform professional learning across sectors to build a more just and educated society. And we do that by drawing attention to a framework called sustainable learning, which we designed. And it has 5 elements: systems thinking, loop learning, purposeful pedagogy, democratic engagement, and digital geographies. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that later. Why do we say sustainable? We say sustainable because what we know is the problems we are facing are problems of the future, and that we won't resolve them by using the systems of the past. We've tried that repeatedly, and it doesn't work. And what is happening that has thrown us into this quote unquote new situation? What are we facing? What we're facing is, whoops, let's get back to that. We are in the midst of what's known as the 4th Industrial Revolution. And just to position that a little bit and put it into context, the 1st Industrial Revolution was the use of mechanization, steam, and water power to accomplish work. The 2nd Industrial Revolution is marked by mass production and assembly lines. The 3rd Industrial Revolution, which is where most of us who are on this call probably came up through school, is with computers. We are now entering the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is characterized by the fusion of all of these things on the internet and the biological worlds, the physical worlds, and the use of new technologies. That has caused no measurable amount of pain to all of us in education. And I just want to take a minute to do a shout out to all the teachers online who have just lived through probably one of the worst years of their careers. That brings us to Education 4.0. And this is where we really start digging into what will early childhood look like? How do we teach social emotional learning, psychosocial skills, the things that are going to be very important in this new milieu, and where will we get the tools and the understanding to teach in that milieu? So what is Education 4.0? Education 4.0, there are many descriptions. You can Google Education 4.0, but the World Economic Forum does a very good job to say, and this is what makes this particular session today so important, an increased premium on both digital and social emotional skills, new delivery mechanisms for learning and training, and new learning ecosystems. I just want to take a minute to emphasize this concept of ecosystems, which we will come back to, but we are more and more required to understand the larger ecosystems in which we work. Again, COVID has highlighted this, and that all calls for a transformation of primary and secondary education as we know it. We think the way through that transition for teachers is by understanding this sustainability and sustainable learning. And sustainable learning is a theory of practices that contribute to a healthy learning ecosystem in which knowledge is co-created and shared in communities, in which teachers and the systems in which they work are self-reflective and adaptive to readily changing environments. This, again, is COVID, but it's also in every country and in the US, in school districts, laws change, funding changes, staffing change, knowledge changes at the speed of the internet. So how can any one teacher manage to stay current and have their skills effective for teaching in this environment? And so the idea is that we need to master a set of processes rather than a set of content. And that is the big shift. We're shifting from content to process, to pedagogy. And if we have those tools, we can then adapt much more readily to what is thrown at us, whether it's a pandemic or a new president. So I'm not going to read all of these for you. I have the website in the bottom left corner, just to say that very briefly, purposeful pedagogy means we teach with intention and we know what it is that we want to achieve, sometimes called starting with the end in mind. Systems thinking is that we understand we teach in a context that's larger than just our classroom. Loop learning is very focused on reflection and the ways that we look at our own practice and how successful we are being in our practice, not for the purposes of evaluation, but for the purposes of improvement. Democratic engagement, everybody gets to be at the table, everybody gets to have a voice, and everybody gets to participate in the creation and co-creation of content and the learning experience. And digital geographies is that we make sure that everything we use digitally is informed by the way teachers teach, not necessarily the things that technologists want to give us. This is a primary obstacle for teachers, is getting heard by the ed tech market. So I'm going to wrap up by telling you, just showing you one example of sustainable learning in action. And again, I'm not going to go through the details, but I want to go through the process. This is a report we just released on MENA higher education, pedagogy, technology, and the refugee experience. So we're looking at faculty. The first thing we did, as you'll see at the top, is who is in that ecosystem? Who is impacting what teachers have to do in the classroom? So their primary relationships are with teachers and their students. You have all these other factors pushing down. And then we looked at each of the disciplines of sustainable learning. We established in this context what was needed to get to where we want to go with digital fluency in this case. And then we provided a series of pathways. And I would encourage those of us who are teaching or designing learning, and learning is a design science, to think about this process as you're developing your early childhood and inclusive education. I want to take my closing, I keep pressing the up button here, to ask you to reflect. One of the things I find, and I'm sure you do as well, that when you work with teachers, most of the answers are in the room. And so we've created a Padlet, which I will share with you, and I'm sure many of you have used it, and somebody will post the Padlet in the chat. And I'm going to encourage you to think about these kinds of questions when you break into your small groups. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to go to Padlet and share that screen and ask you if you would all participate in co-creating together. I'm hoping you can all see my screen now. And just before you break into these groups, to think about the kinds of things that inform sustainability, using mapping, how you reflect, game-based learning, which is certainly the future or part of the future of education, early childhood education, how you differentiate instruction, and strategies for engaging parents. Please write whatever you want. We will share this. You can have it. You can talk to each other about it. We want this to be a resource for you as you break into your groups or to take away with you. And with that, I will thank you. And we're going to give you 2 minutes. I have a timer on my clock to post, so please jump in.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Diana. Please join me in applauding, which Zoom lets you, add applause and the like, and also sharing in the chat, which many of you are doing, which is really helpful. Huge thanks to Diana and to Manos. We're going to delve more deeply into 3 specific breakout sessions. One on social emotional learning and psychosocial support, facilitated by Danielle De La Fuente with Amal Alliance. With a Catalyst speaker, we're so honored to be joined by Leah Batat with World Learning Algeria. Group 2 on teacher and caregiver well-being will be facilitated by Dominic Register from Salzburg, specifically the Salzburg Global Seminar, with Catalyst speaker Ximena Salado. And the third group on early childhood development will be expertly facilitated by Sandrine Bohan-Jacqua, and with Catalyst speaker Nada Elatar. My apologies if I did not say people's names correctly. And we are really thrilled to have that chance to delve more deeply into those 3 sessions. Please stay with us. Many of you, when you registered, selected one of those topics specifically, and hoping that the Zoom gods are with us. This has been well tested. Our colleague Faye is organizing this really brilliantly. If some of you aren't going directly into your preferred session, just do communicate that with us in the chat or here in this full plenary, and we'll help make sure everyone gets to the right place.
I think you have 30 seconds left here for
Great.
the Padlet.
Will the Padlet stay open, Diana, as well?
Yes. It'll
Okay.
stay open. You can, use it in your groups too if you want to use it to post things there. It's all yours. You will hear my timer go off. Okay, the thing is, how do you turn the timer off? Thank you all so much. It was great seeing you. Thank you again for inviting me. Shall I stop sharing, Daniela?
That's fine. Thank you so much, Diana. And we welcome everyone to go delve deeper into these 3 breakout groups where we will specifically continue for the next 30 minutes, and then we'll come back for the final 15 minutes together of the workshop. So please continue to share your ideas, your reflections, your resources. Faye and Dominic, any guidance as people are going into those breakout sessions?
Yeah, just to say, I've done my best to assign people. There are a number of people who might not be assigned, but if you have the most recent version of Zoom, you should be able to also assign yourself. So you can do that by clicking on the breakout rooms icon and assign yourself to the group that you would like to be in. If that option isn't available to you, then please stay here and you can tell me by posting in the chat which group you'd like to go to, and I will do my best to get everyone where they need to be as quickly as possible. I'm going to open the rooms now for those of you that are already assigned, so you should get a notification.
I can't hear you, Sandrine.
Okay, so as people are doing, if you could post in the chat, that would be fantastic, and I will assign you to the room of your choice. Please just be patient and bear with us as we do this, or as I do this.
Thank you, Faye, so much. Let us know if we can help in any way. Thanks. We see that several people have already posted in the chat box, which is really helpful. If you're having difficulty hearing anything, we'll share again where the live link is, although that maybe more was working for the main sessions. But thanks for being patient, everybody.